In 2024, Al-Sharif's Reuters team was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for breaking news photography.
The main point in it is a call for the United States to enter now into negotiations with the other 8 countries that have nuclear weapons for an agreement to eliminate their arsenals with appropriate verification and enforcement procedures put in place and with an agreed upon timetable for dismantling the weapons.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. We start the program with a tribute to Anas Al-Sharif, the journalist who was murdered with 5 other media workers in the Gaza Strip by Israel last week. In 2024, Al-Sharif's Reuters team was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for breaking news photography for their, quote, raw and urgent, unquote, photos documenting the Gaza war. Of course, Israel says he was part of a terrorist unit. Israeli Yuval Abraham on 972mag.com explains that Israel has a whole army unit that's called the Legitimation Cell, dedicated to proving all the people they kill are hateful terrorists. So Netanyahu said that Israel's next plan will be to take over all of Gaza. One aspect of this horror is to expel 1.2 million people from Gaza City and flatten most or all of the buildings. There was a detailed piece on this in the Israeli paper Haaretz, admitting that the IDF would have to face well-prepared military resistance and might have to call up 100,000 reserve soldiers. It notes that many Palestinians would refuse to leave Gaza City since past evacuations have left them nowhere without the most basic resources. The article says, quote, in such cases, the military says its forces are prepared to use artillery at nearby areas to encourage residents to leave. Corporate media and the politicians in the U.S. are saying nothing about this barbaric idea. There will certainly be many Israeli soldiers killed and wounded if this plan takes effect. So many Israeli soldiers are even now committing suicide for what they've seen and done. Ways to reach Israeli soldiers need to be thought up, just as what happened in the U.S. during the Vietnam War. You know, the Zionists claim all of Palestine, but actually they claim lots more. At an interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu, the interviewer, a former member of the Israeli parliament named Sharon Tal, gave Netanyahu a pendant and said it was a symbol of Greater Israel, and asked if Netanyahu was connected to the idea of Greater Israel. Netanyahu answered, very much. Tal sells these pendants online. Note its shape looks nothing like Palestine. Zionists increasingly say that Israel's border should be what they claim was promised to the Jewish people in the Bible, from the Euphrates in Iraq to the river of Egypt, which they say is the Nile. Here's one possible map for Greater Israel. Note it takes in parts of Egypt, Syria, all of Jordan, and part of Saudi Arabia. This is a patch on one soldier's uniform showing Greater Israel. It's unofficial, so the soldier could get into trouble for wearing it. But no one has heard about any case where that ever happened. This is a photo of Awdah Hathaleen, who helped create the Academy Award-winning film No Other Land. He was murdered on July 28th. The Israeli human rights group Btselem released the video of Hathaleen's murder. They entitled it, Palestinian activist Awdah Hathaleen filmed himself being killed by settler Yenon Levy. Levy was briefly detained and subject to house arrest and then set free. The video is age restricted. This QR code will get you to it. You don't see any blood or body, but it is shocking to hear his last gasp. Btselem also shows the Israeli Yenon Levy going back to the same area where he shot the gun last week, escorted by an armed settler. On August 4th, a federal judge made an appalling decision. The judge virtually said that the Israeli flag and Jews were the same thing. It was a case where a woman allegedly tugged on an Israeli flag worn by a person counter-protesting a Code Pink action for Palestinians. The judge ruled that the tugging was not just assault, but an act of racial discrimination because the so-called Star of David on the Israeli flag was the symbol of the, quote, Jewish race, unquote. There are so many things wrong with this. More next week. The balance of the program will be about the end of the world. That is, what could very well happen if there is a nuclear war. It's from a talk by Ira Helfand, who is a leader in two organizations that each won the Nobel Peace Prize. He spoke on August 7th in the American Museum for Tort Law in Winsted, Connecticut.
I'm going to use a model of a single very large bomb, 20 megatons. We used to have weapons that big in the arsenal. We don't anymore. But it turns out that one 20 megaton bomb causes almost exactly the same destruction as 9 300 kiloton bombs spread out over the area you're trying to destroy. And so it's really quite a good model to help us understand what we're talking about here. Excuse me. Within 1,000th of a second, the detonation of this bomb, a fireball would form, reaching out for 2 miles in every direction, 4 miles across. Within this entire area, everything would be vaporized. The buildings, the trees, the people, the upper level of the earth itself would disappear. To a distance of 4 miles in every direction, the explosion would generate winds greater than 600 miles per hour. Mechanical forces of that magnitude destroy anything that we can build. This building, you wouldn't be able to find a trace of it. To a distance of 6 miles in every direction, the heat would be so intense that automobiles would melt. And to a distance of 16 miles in every direction, the heat would still be so intense that everything flammable would burn. Paper, cloth, wood, plastic, gasoline, heating oil, it would all ignite. And you'd get hundreds of thousands of fires, which over the next half hour would coalesce into a firestorm, 32 miles across, covering over 800 square miles. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. all of the oxygen would be consumed, and every living thing would die. In the case of New York, or Moscow, or Beijing, large cities, we're talking about 12 to 15, possibly 18 million people dead in a half an hour. And if this attack were part of a large-scale war between the United States and Russia, for example, this kind of destruction would take place at every major city in both countries. All told, something on the order of 200, maybe 300 million people dead in an afternoon. And those who survived would find themselves inhabiting a wasteland that we cannot imagine. None of the things that we required to keep ourselves alive would be available. There'd be no internet, there'd be no electric grid, there'd be no cell phones, there'd be no food distribution system, there'd be no public health system, there'd be no banking system, there'd be no law and order, there'd be nothing. And the vast majority of the people in both countries who survived the attack on day one would also die in the following months. They'd die from radiation exposure, from epidemic disease, from starvation, from exposure to the elements. And this is only part of the story. I've only been talking so far about what happens in the countries that fight the war. But this would be a catastrophe for the entire planet because all of these fires would put enormous amounts of soot into the upper atmosphere, about 150 million tons in a war between the US and Russia at current levels of armament. That soot would block out the sun and drop temperatures across the planet, an average of 18 degrees Fahrenheit. In the interior regions of North America and Eurasia, the temperatures would drop anywhere from 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We have not seen conditions on this planet that cold in 18,000 years, since the coldest moment of the last ice age. And under those conditions, all the ecosystems which have evolved since the end of that ice age would collapse. There'd be 3 years in which the temperature dropped below zero. There was a frost every single day. Food production across the planet would essentially stop. And according to a paper that was published in the journal Nature Food in the summer of 2022, 3/4 of the human race, about 6 billion people, would starve to death in the first 2 years. The study only went out for 2 years. The famine would continue, and we do not know what the ultimate death toll would be. It is possible that we would become extinct as a species. That same study also looked at what would happen if India and Pakistan went to war. And it looked at a number of different scenarios, given different numbers of nuclear weapons and different strength. But the largest possible war that could take place, given their current level of armament, and they are adding to their arsenal every month, the largest war that they considered would lead to the death of 100 million people in South Asia directly. But also it would cause a global famine. Not quite as bad as the one that a US-Russia war would cause, but bad enough to kill 2 billion people, a quarter of humanity in the first 2 years, including 130 million people here in the United States. Now, what I've just described is not the plot of a movie. It's not something people have made up to scare us. This is the danger we are living with every day that we allow these weapons to continue to exist. And if we allow these weapons to continue to exist, I think it is fair to say that it is not a question of if, but only a question of when this will happen. We know of at least 6 occasions during the nuclear weapons era when either Moscow or Washington began the process of launching its nuclear arsenal, always in the mistaken belief that it was under attack by the other side. And on each of these occasions, the counterattack was called off at the last minute. We haven't survived this far into the nuclear weapons era because we knew what we were doing. It wasn't because we had wise leaders or sound military doctrine or infallible technology. As former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara summed it up, we survived because, quote, we lucked out. It was luck that prevented nuclear war. And we have to understand that that is the current policy of all 9 nuclear weapon states, a hope for continued, perpetual, perfect good luck. And this is crazy. We all know that luck doesn't last forever, and it won't last for us either. So that's the bad news, and there's plenty of it. But there is very important good news as well. And the main point is, this doesn't have to happen. Nuclear weapons are not a force of nature that we have no control over. It is not as though an asteroid is coming at the planet and there's nothing we can do about it. These are little machines. Most nuclear warheads are about the size of the chairs you're sitting in. We've already dismantled about 50,000 of them since the height of the Cold War. We know exactly how to dismantle the 12,000 that remain, and we could probably do it in about 3 or 4 years in a process that would not disrupt daily life on this planet at all. All that's missing is the political will to make that decision. And that's where we come in, because we have to create that political will. And we can take, I think, great hope as we undertake that process by the fact that we've already done this once before. In 1983, the United States put Pershing missiles in Europe with the stated aim of being able to fight and win a nuclear war in Europe. This was a totally insane idea, but it was US policy at the time. Less than 2 years later, Reagan and Gorbachev sat down and said together, nuclear war can never be won, and it must never be fought. And it represented a complete 180-degree change in the nuclear policy of both countries, and it was brought about in short order by enormous public pressure, by a demand by millions of people to stop the crazy things that they were doing. We've done it before. We can do it again. And there is, at this point, an international movement that has grown over the last few years, led largely by the countries which do not have nuclear weapons, demanding that the countries that do live up to their legally binding obligations under Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and sit down and have serious negotiations to eliminate their arsenal. These countries, led by, actually by civil society, largely in the form of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, came together in the summer of 2017 and adopted at the UN the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons by a vote of 122 to 1. This treaty entered into force in January of 2021 when the 50th country ratified it. There are now, I believe it's 75 or 76 countries which have formally ratified the treaty, and another 25 that have signed it but haven't ratified yet. The countries which have nuclear weapons have not been part of this process. And so our attention really needs to turn now to changing their behavior, their policy, their thinking. And the place where I think we have the best possibility of doing that is here in the United States. In the 1980s, it wasn't the US, frankly, it was the Soviet Union that really pushed for the change in nuclear policy. I certainly don't see that kind of leadership coming from Putin, and I don't see it at the moment coming from Xi, although he might surprise us. I don't really see it coming from Trump, although he also might surprise us. But we have a system where we change leaders on a regular basis. And what we need to do is to create a movement in this country so that either Trump during this term or whoever follows him in 2029 takes as their highest responsibility the elimination of nuclear weapons. We have formed a campaign in this country, Back from the Brink, to bring about that change. The campaign is modeled on the Freeze campaign of the 1980s, which many of you may remember. We have put forward a prescription of what US nuclear policy should be, and we've gone around the country organizing communities, cities and towns, NGOs, faith communities, state legislatures, to endorse this platform in the belief that if enough people endorse it, we essentially create a national consensus, which is what happened with the Freeze resolution back in the 80s. Our platform's a little bit more complex than the Freeze, but the main point in it is a call for the United States to enter now into negotiations with the other 8 countries that have nuclear weapons for an agreement to eliminate their arsenals with appropriate verification and enforcement procedures put in place and with an agreed upon timetable for dismantling the weapons. We also ask the United States to take a number of intermediate steps, unilaterally, things it can do, which will lessen the danger of nuclear war, demonstrate American commitment to this endeavor, and give momentum to the whole process. We asked the U.S. to adopt a no first use policy, to pledge, like a number of other nuclear weapon states have already, that it will not start a nuclear war. We asked the United States to end the situation where one individual, the President of the United States, has unchecked authority to launch nuclear war. The Constitution says only Congress as a whole can declare a war. Launching a nuclear attack is clearly a declaration of war. We have allowed a system to evolve where the President can make this decision without anybody else having an ability to check that. We asked the United States to take its weapons off territorial alert. This is a vestige of the Cold War. If we decide that we want to blow up the world, we don't need to do it in 15 minutes. We can do it tomorrow. We have submarines that are invulnerable, that are at sea. We do not need to keep our weapons on territorial alert, and it makes them more vulnerable to terrorism. It increases the chance of an accidental launch. And finally, we asked the United States to abandon the plan to spend $1.7 trillion at least, the numbers going up, over the next 30 years, to enhance and replace every element of the nuclear arsenal with new weapons that are designed to last till the year 2070 or beyond. This platform is embodied in resolutions that have been passed by about 80 cities and towns across the country, including most of the major cities: Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Washington, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Des Moines, Tucson, Honolulu. It's also been endorsed by state legislatures in Oregon, California, and Rhode Island, by the Senate in Maine, by the Assembly in New Jersey, and there are resolutions before the Massachusetts legislature, the Maryland legislature. I believe one is going to be introduced into the Connecticut legislature. There is a resolution in Congress, in both houses at this point. In the House, it's H-Res 317. It currently has 29 co-sponsors. It was only introduced a few months ago, including from Connecticut, both Representative Larson and Representative DeLauro. We're in conversation with Representative Hayes and Representative Courtney and Representative Himes, hoping that they will join. There is also a resolution now in the Senate, S-Res 323, that was introduced just a few weeks ago, actually, by 5 senators. It has not yet been endorsed by either Senator Murphy or Senator Blumenthal, and we're hoping that they will both become co-sponsors of this resolution also. The campaign's also been endorsed by 480 NGO-type organizations around the country, most of the national faith community: the Episcopal Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, the Congregational Church, the Unitarian Church, the Reconstructionist Jewish Movement, the Islamic Society of North America, Pax Christi and the Catholic community, Soka Gakkai International and the Buddhist community, and many local churches and synagogues and mosques have as well. It's been endorsed by the Sierra Club, by 350.org, by the Natural Resources Defense Council in the environmental movement, and excuse me, by many scientific organizations like the Federation of American Scientists, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, Union of Concerned Scientists, Physicians for Social Responsibility. We have formed, we now are up to 26 hubs, which are sort of like local foci of activity, including one here in Connecticut that's mainly based in the Hartford area, but has people from all over the state. And this is a rapidly growing movement. The 2 most recent developments, which I am particularly excited about: there's now a group called Students for Nuclear Disarmament, which is active both on high school campuses and college campuses. 14 schools are involved in this at this point, and there are about half dozen others in which we are in active conversation with students to form chapters at their schools. We've also been endorsed for the first time in a significant way by organized labor, which I think is a huge step forward. In Massachusetts, the Western Massachusetts Area Federation of Labor, which is the umbrella group representing all of the unions in Western Massachusetts, has endorsed the campaign and has called on all the individual unions to endorse it, has called on the state AFL-CIO to endorse it. The Massachusetts Teachers Association just voted to endorse the campaign about 10 days ago. This is the largest union in New England. It has 117,000 members. And not only have they endorsed the campaign, but they have sent out, they will be sending out rather, information to all 117,000 teachers about a curriculum that's been developed by WGBH, the PBS station in Boston, for use in high schools to educate high school students about the nuclear issue. The Mass Nurses Association have also endorsed, and there are unions elsewhere in the country that in response to this are considering endorsing as well. So we've got a significant movement, and we have the real opportunity to bring about this change. I think when people hear about all of this, a natural part of the reaction is to feel kind of dwarfed by the problem. You know, all these nuclear weapons, little me, what can I do? We've tried to design this campaign, Back from the Brink, to involve communities. The tagline is Back from the Brink, bringing communities together to prevent nuclear war. And we ask people to approach it that way, to reach out to the communities they already belong to the faith communities, to the Rotary clubs, to the unions, to the professional societies, and try to get, as a first step, get them to take a position on this. There is a hub now in Connecticut that people can work with that brings together a whole bunch of people. So people are not working on this problem alone. And you know, it's important to understand no one of us is going to solve this problem by his or herself. But by the same token, no one of us really can be permitted to step back from that part of the problem, which we can address. And that's the challenge I would offer to you today, if you're not already involved in work to eliminate nuclear weapons, that you figure out how you can fit into this program.
So there is a different way forward. Even fiercely hostile nations can realize that they're on the path of mutual obliteration, and that they can take action in their own self-interests. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle Video News.